Hello.
Hey,
Hi.
Hello.
Hello.
First of all, we want to thank you so much, Bishop Eaton, for being here, here, there, but here also. And we are just thrilled to have this opportunity to chat with you. We're going to start a little bit with some introductions, just so you know who you're speaking with.
Okay.
You and I have met several times. I'm Kristen. I serve at a church here in Kansas City alongside my husband. And my call, though, comes from my work as a hospital chaplain at a suburban hospital here in town.
My name is Phoebe Morad. I'm Executive Director of Lutherans Restoring Creation, and I'm calling in from Braintree, Massachusetts.
I am Sarah Locke. I'm in Jacksonville, Florida. I am a campus minister at UNF, University of North Florida, and Jacksonville University.
I am Deaconess Heidi Michelson, and I live in Heredia, Costa Rica. I run the broad semester program and some short-term service learning programs for other universities.
I'm Larry Erickson. I'm a member of First Lutheran Church in Manhattan, Kansas, and professor of chemical engineering at Kansas State University.
My name is Booker Vance. I'm a retired pastor of the ELCA. I also work for Elevate Energy, which is a non-for-profit that does care for earth, care for creation, and do advocacy.
Hi, Bishop Eaton. I'm Jeff Schlesinger. I'm pastor at a two-point parish not too far from you in northern Illinois.
My name's Pat Almanrode, and I live in New York City. And my home congregation is St. Peter's Lutheran in Midtown Manhattan.
Hi, Bishop Eaton. Thanks so much for meeting with us. I'm Barbara Rossing. I teach.
I know. I'm Barbara.
Anyway, I teach New Testament. So on our board also is Jim, our treasurer, who's a Native American, wonderful, from Massachusetts, works closely with Phoebe on budget and finance things. Ruth Ivory Moore, who you obviously know. And then Henry Huntington is this great scientist. Phoebe and I read about him in the Living Lutheran magazine. He had the I Am a Lutheran column maybe a year and a half ago, and it turns out he's a climate scientist up in Alaska and loves being a Lutheran. So he's on our board also. So we do have a couple scientists.
Okay, well, thank you all for introducing yourselves. Bishop Eaton, is there anything you'd like to say about yourself?
Well, I'm Elizabeth Eaton. I'm right now coming to you live from my living room in Skokie, Illinois. I've been in this call since November of 2013. This is a remarkable church, very diverse in opinions about a lot of things. We have folks like you who understand the reality of climate change, and we have folks who just won't believe it. But I have had a chance to meet with ranchers in South Dakota who are trying to reintroduce the original grasses and do sustainable ranching. And so and also in another person, farmers in the eastern North Dakota also trying to do that same thing. So it's been kind of interesting. So, but I'm going to tell you about my neighborhood. I love my neighborhood. It's so funny. So Skokie in the 70s had a really, really large Jewish community, and there's still a significant Jewish community, but it's really, really diverse. And on our street, our block, I think my husband and I are one of the few people for whom English is our first language. And so the other day, I'm looking out the window, and our octogenarian Taiwanese evangelical neighbors were getting their daily delivery from Kosher to Go. And then I was working on the yard a week ago Sunday, and just hot and grubby, whatever. And I see this woman walking toward me. So I'm trying to get the leaves off the sidewalk. She goes, "No, this is for you. This is our holy month of Ramadan. I saw how hard you were working. I figured you didn't want to make supper, so I made this for you." It's amazing.
Well, I have to say it is quite an honor that you shared a sermon for our Good Shepherd Sunday. And I have to admit, when we opened it up to questions for you for a follow-up, we didn't know how many we were going to get, and there were a lot. So there were about 40,000 people participated in that service because they registered from their churches and watched from their own church, which was really incredible to hear all these different people and voices chiming in response, but they asked a lot of questions, all very, very good. And we tried to compile them into 3 because we only have an hour with you. So what I'm really hopeful for is that you enjoy this time together and we can continue this because I'm sure we're not going to get through all of them. So we did send you those to, so this isn't the first chance you're thinking about it, but I understand that we tried to pack in about 10 questions per issue. So, but the first one though, we're going to mute everybody else. A few of us are going to ask the questions. We'll mute everybody else and then open it up because I especially want to hear if you have questions for us too. So,
okay.
Pastor Kristen, take it away.
Okay, so our first question comes from Paul Santemeyer, who actually wrote the ELCA's 1993 social statement on climate justice. He asked, Lutherans are known for lifting up Romans 1:17 about the just living by faith, which is, for in the gospel, the righteousness of God is revealed, a righteousness that is by faith from first to last, just as it is written, the righteous will live by faith. What is your favorite Earth Care text and why?
I thought that was an interesting question.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, in Revelation, and the leaves of the trees are for the healing of the nations. I like that. But I really sort of stuck on at the very end of Jonah. Jonah was complaining, and this is terrible, and doggone it, they listened to God, they repented. I'm so angry. That's so funny and petulant. But when God is talking to a couple times in that story, all of the inhabitants, including the animals, put on sackcloth and ashes. So that the animals were not separate from the community. I like that. But at the end, when God is gently but firmly letting Jonah know what the stakes were here, he says, all these thousands of people who don't know their right hand from their left, and they would be gone. And he said, and much cattle. So that tender inclusion of non-human parts of the creation, I always like that little "and much cattle" part. It seemed to me in that part when the whole community was in repentance because there had been a break between the community and God, and that affected all of the community, including the non-human part of the community. I don't think the animals had put on sackcloth and ashes. They probably didn't do anything wrong, but I thought that was neat.
That was really a perfect segue to the second question, which I have to admit I was hesitant to throw in anything to do with animal welfare because the whole meat eating issue is pretty taboo to talk about in mixed company. But since listening to the Good Shepherd message, the general question regarding the welfare of farmed animals and the people who work in that industry really came up for many of our questioners. So do you know, does the ELCA have resources that can help raise up these complicated issues around industrial farming? Maybe what have you learned when you were with those ranchers? What ways can you think of that can faithfully encourage conversation about all this and intersections?
Yes. Right now we have an ELCA Witness and Society team, and they're conducting listening sessions, learning more about the realities and challenges for Lutherans with vocations in agriculture. Have we made a statement? Make a statement on everything, but factory farms, I don't think that they're sustainable. And so when I was with this rancher who was trying to be more sustainable, not only would he rotate the cattle so they wouldn't overgraze, but he also was trying to mitigate. I mean, there are a lot of cattle byproducts. They just end up in a pool. It's going to affect the groundwater. So he was trying to do that. And his neighboring, both of them, a man and a woman, and their neighbors were not necessarily doing that, nor were they restoring the original, getting rid of the invasive species and restoring the original grasses. So we know that we're trying to listen around the country to what people are doing. We give a grant to the National Farm Worker Ministry, and it's part of its agenda is to protect and promote the rights and well-being of farm workers. So that's important. Let me see. There's tons of Humane Society Faith Resources, HSFR, from the ELCA, and I think Roger Willer is a person to talk to about that. You know, we take a look, especially in these HSFR, what is the relationship, for clues for the relationship between God and God's creation? And I think a lot of us, and me included, I included, read so quickly over Genesis chapter 1 that we get to the part where male and female are created and God said, behold, it is very good. However, before human beings ever came on the scene, God called the creation good, very good. So that's an important part, especially when I think that we've become, in a lot of ways, so disassociated from our place amongst and amidst the creation. Luther, this is not scripture, but Luther had this great quote, which I'm going to butcher anyways, but he says the entire divine presence is in every, Barbara, you could help me with the quote if you can think about every creature more deeply, more intimately, more inwardly, more completely than the creature is to itself. And so when I first heard that, actually from Cynthia Molabita, and a Bishop's Academy, and it made me think about that the divine nature is in all of creation. And when we somehow separate ourselves or try to separate ourselves out from being one part of the creation, we're actually separating ourselves out from God. It's a detachment from God. So that's my Luther thing. Luther also thought that doggies go to heaven, so I'm happy about that. So there's a whole quote on that.
He did?
Oh yeah. What do you say? Be thou comforted, little dog, for in heaven thou too shall have a golden tail.
I love how you know that quote.
I hear people typing too.
I'm typing. I didn't know about this.
I think it could have been in a table talk, would be my guess, or something. I don't know if I can see it, but that's there. I first heard it from Marcus Lorman. You know, those Missouri Synod people, they know they're Luther, so he could just quote that pretty quickly.
You gave a lot of resources too, and out of the listening sessions, where will we, and maybe this isn't figured out yet, but what's coming out of those listening sessions? Where do we hear more about that? And
you know, that I don't know. That's a good question. I will ask Roger, and I'll have him get in touch with you.
Excellent.
It'd be good to know.
Pat, did you want to say something?
Yeah, actually I did. I hope it's not inappropriate, but the whole strand of the conversation there about that bringing the animals in and farmers and all of that made me wonder. I'm sure that this is a data point that is known. I hope somebody on this call here, Bishop, if not you, somebody else might know this. How do I put this? What's the penetration of the ELCA into American farm life? Or I guess another way, are we more represented or less represented than other churches among American farmers?
I think that depends on the region of the country. Certainly in the Dakotas, there's probably a pretty significant representation of Lutherans. I think places in the South that there aren't that many Lutherans, I would guess. I don't know how it is in California, but there are fewer Lutherans there. We've got farmers all over the country, but in places, we had our research and evaluation guy, Ken Inskeep, who's retired. He likes to refer to the Fertile Crescent of Lutheranism, and that's Dakotas, Montana, coming around through Minnesota, Wisconsin, wrapping around the Great Lakes, ending up in Ohio. And so my guess is that we have farm folks there. When I don't know if you remember this, but there was this terrible freak blizzard in South Dakota in 2013 in October. And when that happened, 90,000 head of livestock were killed in that storm. It was devastating. But then we worked with Lutherans, social service folks, but also with farmers and ranchers, and I had a chance to visit them after that and to see they're pretty represented there. And I remember one in particular, this ranching family, and the son, a grown child, he had a favorite blue roan cattle. I'm a city girl, so I don't, but he even of all the cattle they had, there was one that was his favorite, which I think did not survive the storm. But then they were looking at these animals, and when I went there, most of them had been buried, but there were still some frozen on the ground. They just looked like they were asleep. It was the saddest thing. And this rancher said, this is so heartbreaking for him because God had given them the responsibility to care and steward these animals in this land, and they couldn't do it because of the storm. They'd also received emails and other letters saying, I wish you would have died in the storm instead of the animals. So not always helpful. And then people said, why don't you put them in a barn? Well, I don't think they've ever seen a ranching operation. And these might be the same people who clamor for free range cattle. So, but no, I think that's where, I don't know how we would find out that. Someone would know that. I don't.
I was just wondering because I'm certainly a city guy. You said you described yourself as a city girl, but it seems like knowing that would help us perhaps tailor our approach a little bit to some of these issues.
It could. Go ahead, please.
Yeah, I certainly can speak to that, having spent my entire ministry in small town and rural ministry in synods where, when the synod I'm in now, which is I'm 55 miles from where the bishop is, but this synod has 146 congregations. About 100 of them are small town and rural ministry sites. When I was in northwestern Wisconsin at the beginning of my ministry, there's Lutheran farmers all up and down in the Midwest, in Illinois, in Wisconsin, Minnesota. We have tons of them. The Norwegians and the Germans who came to this area came to farm, and they are still here. The congregation I sit in is an open air congregation, and there's lots of them like this. They are dying because of the changing agricultural scene and the larger farms and less people in the rural areas, but that's not because we don't have Lutheran farmers. We have lots of them. Mm-hmm. And certainly in the Midwest, and I would assume in Ohio too, but I don't know Ohio as much.
Interestingly enough, Ohio, I didn't know this until I was placed on the, sort of the agricultural ready bench, so we could go and, advocate for, and that was like crazy because I'm not a farmer, but agriculture is the largest industry in Ohio still, even with all the science and technology and industries we've got up and going. And even now with the comeback of some of the steel and other manufacturing, it is. We do, what's not interesting, but a challenge for us is that at one point, one of the staff who I think a predecessor of Ruth's had suggested that the ELCA have Meatless Mondays. And I'll tell you, the ranchers in the Dakotas, Montana, this was really not well received. So how, and I think this is maybe questions that you wrestle with all the time, these folks with whom I've met and others hearing from their bishops, and I have had like town hall meetings with these folks virtually and in person. They believe that their godly creation is to be a rancher or a farmer, and to honor this trust that they've been given, and to provide food for folks in this country and around the world. So that's how they view their vocation. Mm-hmm. And then we also have the reality, not so much I think with small farmers, but with red meat, as you know better than I, that's pretty. It takes a lot of energy and resources and water and everything to do. So how then do we care for the climate and creation that's entrusted to all of us, and also honor the vocations of the farmers and the ranchers? That was a really tense time right after the Meatless Monday suggestion.
Well, this is Pastor Vance. The other part is that you have to spin it all the way around when you're looking at it. The things that we have trouble in Midwest, and neither one of y'all mentioned Kansas or Iowa, but Kansas was always a farming state. The Swedes landed in the middle of where Lindsborg was, where I went to college.
You went to Lindsborg?
Yeah, I was in.
I know you went to Bethany. You're a Swede.
Yeah, I am.
No, I even got a T-shirt.
But one of the challenges has been the migrant workers that have found themselves in the middle of Iowa and in the middle of other the Midwest cities, and then find themselves being abused. And how do we deal with the workers? And the other challenges that in Chicago in particular, we're doing a lot of what they call urban agriculture.
Right.
A lot of the land has been devastated by some of the lead and other things that are going on. And so we do urban gardening on the south side of Chicago, and are really trying to move into figuring that stuff out, not only teaching healthy eating, healthy growth and so forth, because of the diabetes and the other health disparities that people of color are faced with. So this is a great discussion, because there are all kind of ways to spin it to help us to understand this is a broader concept that we need to kind of go at.
And also, when I grew up in Cleveland, but then also the last parish I served was in Ashtabula, which is a small city on Lake Erie. But when major industry had moved out, they just left. We had brownfields. And we know that has in Chicago on the south side, and that's usually happens in communities of color, because they don't have the political clout. It's not happening, for example, in Arlington Heights. But then how can the remediation happen in those brownfields so that they can be turned into urban gardening? That's really important. You're so correct.
I've been praying for Detroit since we had the youth gathering there. They have empty lot after empty lot as they're cleaning up all their vacant buildings, but they have a unique opportunity to show the world how to do urban agriculture, because they have full city blocks that are just vacant and there to be made green in some way or other. That's going to help in so many ways.
And then you have somebody like Venus Williams in Milwaukee with Alice's Garden, which they do both the gardening, but they also get the herbs and they sell the seeds. But they're and even in Detroit, in that Michigan area, there are some wonderful gardens that are coming out of that. But they're really pilot programs that model for other areas to look at and say, this is what we can do, or we do it in a different way. So no, you're absolutely, they're wonderful signs and wonders that we see. We just have to figure out how to help people understand that this is possible. One of the things with Carter G. Woodson, and not only Carter G. Woodson, but George Washington Carver, which I saw when I was growing up driving through the South, where you couldn't stop because restrooms wouldn't allow us, or hotels wouldn't allow us to go across I-10. But when we went to the agriculture at Tuskegee, which, if you know Tammy Jackson, she's a graduate of Tuskegee Institute. But one of the things about Tuskegee was this issue with George Washington Carver and the peanut farmer, because the cotton had deprived the land. They had to replant peanuts and sweet potatoes and those kind of crops in order to replenish the land, and that was the reason that they could be able to sustain themselves, particularly black farmers in the South and so forth. There's a wonderful, rich history throughout the United States, and the Lutheran Church is right in the middle of all that. We really do need to integrate the environmental kind of discussion about how do we do and on the South side, when we have a crop, we bring it to the altar and we bless it and we give it to the community free, because we want people to eat healthy, and that's the way we work that. So.
Yeah, and I think you raise another thing, Pastor, that I think for most, I would say for most probably white people, the Black farmer is invisible. And now I know that there's in part of this, the relief package, or part of the infrastructure package that the Biden administration is trying to get through, is significant aid for Black farmers. And it's getting some pushback by the Republicans.
Yeah.
Barbara has a question.
No, I just wanted to say, Booker, thank you so much for calling this Signs and Wonders when we see urban gardens. Because I know I'm working with Faith in Place somewhat, and they talk about the urban gardening, the rain gardens. And, it's easy to think our little efforts are just so little. But for you to say these are signs and wonders, I think this is a kind of, I'm working out with this idea of pocket eschatology, where we can live as pockets of the future, and we bear witness by being little pockets. And that's the signs and wonders. So thank you. It wasn't a question, it was just thinking.
So Bishop, we are just, again, excited, thankful for that word that you gave at our event. I'm encouraging this group, the Restoring Creation, to understand that we have a pivotal role in just getting the message out. But we find that our churches serve in communities where the impacts of climate change continue to disproportionately and adversely communities and environmental justice communities. And we're excited about the vision of the future church. We want to hear you talk a little bit about how LRC can join with you in this great endeavor. We would like to hear specifically your thoughts on how we can both amplify and include voices not so often at our tables, and the witnesses, like we've already started talking, examples of inclusion that give us hope and reason to celebrate and be encouraged. And then the third piece that I'd like you, I'm saying the same question that you had written, I've just kind of rephrased it, but no holds barred and no holding back. What would you like to see on the future church climate justice plate? And how might we serve this to our church? And then hopefully in serving it to the church would change our palates so that we might be able to become accustomed to a new kind of diet, particularly needed in these COVID times and the gun and domestic violence times and the political transition. How can we feed on this in a better way so that we can be energized to do the work that we're doing? I know that's a lot, but
I'll give it a try.
Okay.
And I'm welcome to your ideas too. That we've been working on this future church and new design in some iteration for as long as I've been at least a synod bishop. I remember I was on a group working on this. But my hope and the hope for this design is that it's not just people in Chicago cooking up programs and ideas and then sending them out to the provinces and you guys just put them into play. That doesn't work. And we also realize that there's amazing talent and giftedness amongst all our members. So how do we tap into that? So that's why we're trying, I know this is jargon, but trying to flatten the organization and involve more of us, particularly in some of these really important projects and initiatives. And what you've mentioned, Pastor, about the intersectionality of climate change, poverty, hunger, the displacement of people, mass migration, the extraordinary burdens that women and girls face, that's all tied together. So we're trying in this design is to include this understanding of intersectionality. I think the service and justice home area, and Rafael Malpica Padilla he's leading that group up. But I just taped we don't tape anymore, do we? I just videoed a message about what's going on in Jerusalem. And we said there can't be peace without justice. And as we're doing service and justice, that has to happen. Everywhere where we're working. Now, I had a chance to go to Honduras well, not in 2020, we didn't go anywhere, but the year before. And it's just, there's flooding, so farmers can't work. There's drought in places, so they can't work. The crime and the gangs is a real thing. The government is corrupt. And so now you have people that can't farm because of the climate, or because of the government, or because of criminality, or they're just impoverished. And so they have to leave. And so they come here or other places. And then, you know, as you said before, I think our economy could not function, particularly the agricultural sector, if we did not have the migrants engaged in farming. So it's all connected. We see this in South Sudan as well. I mean, this war has been going on forever. There's drought, and it falls most heavily on the people who are most marginalized. So taking a look at that, seeing that climate change is a theological issue, which you have always held up. It's a spiritual issue, because I believe in many cases human beings have disassociated ourselves from the creation, and that's damaging to us. But it's a justice issue as well.
One of the images that I tried to lift up a minute ago, when I didn't always, I didn't get to go to fine restaurants till I got to college. And so a couple of times I got to go to a fine restaurant, and they used to serve these courses, and I couldn't understand what was going on when they would serve the salad, and then they would serve something else. And then they'd bring a mint by and gave me a mint in the middle of the meal. And I was, what the hell's going on? I don't understand what this mint has to do with it. And then finally I learned that sometimes you had to put something in in your diet to change your palate, because what you were about to eat, you couldn't eat because you had the stuff that you had before. Right now, we're in a church that really needs its palates changed, because we're eating we've added a lot of junk. And we now to be able to eat that foretaste for the feast to come, there's a palate changing going on. How can we clear our palate from the bitterness and some of the anger and frustrations and fear that we've experienced? And so what do you think about palate changing, and what do we need to do in the gospel message that kind of helps us with that? You did some of it with the Good Shepherd. I mean, the shepherd makes sure that you get to the water, and you make sure you graze in the right fields and that kind of thing. But do you get that sense that we're going to have to change some palates because we've been feeding off some bitter stuff that kind of has us, I'm not going to say names, but I just give you the general piece. Yeah.
The former guy, that's what you're going to say.
Yeah.
That's true. I'm pretty sure in 2016, more than half of our people probably voted for the former guy. I don't know how it worked out in 2020. So there's a church already that's, maybe doesn't think or they thought that maybe that, or the populism was the palate cleanser. But it's interesting in the Passover Haggadah that the Jews still have the bitter herbs to remember their bitter time. There might be some of that might be helpful, not for all parts of the church, because experiencing bitter times is not evenly shared, but to be reminded of that. But certainly the gospel is the greatest palate cleanser, and baptism should be as well. And I'm not, Luther had such a rich theology about baptism, but think about the whole thing. We've been buried with Christ. We've died with him in a death like his. We're being washed with water, this precious gift. As they would say, standing rock water is life. And I remember Bishop Donald Criss, who's the bishop in Southeast Michigan. Flint is one of his Flint is one of the cities in his town, and he went there and he said the water, it was filthy. It was filthy. And he says we couldn't, he has tears in his eyes. We couldn't even baptize anybody with this kind of water. So just this whole understanding that we have been changed. We don't always act like it. That it's God's word, but attached to this beautiful element that is absolutely necessary for life, and that all of us are eligible to receive this sacrament. All of us receive God's grace. All of us are claimed by God. Not one group of people claiming supremacy and holding other people down. And neither are human beings more worthy of care than the rest of the creation. I don't know, that's the best I can think of right now.
Come on, this is a conversation, and that's the truth. Is we want to have more conversations because nobody's got it figured out, and that's why we want to hear your ideas and support you, and we want to share with you some of the stuff we're struggling with.
Yeah,
so in this together. We are in this together.
Yeah, I think that's one of the blessings of this lockdown and the pandemic is that even though we're physically separated, in a lot of ways, we see people are more connected on a regular basis, which is helpful. And I hope, I don't want to put more work on you, all of you pastors and leaders, but I hope that we continue with our digital presence for folks. The other, which became very frustrating for me this past summer, but the other unexpected, unintended benefit was that the earth had a chance to rest during 2020. And then you'd hear these stories about the people in India could finally see the Himalayas because the smog was gone. And I know here the wildlife really picked up. And so unfortunately, the rabbits and the squirrels didn't everything I tried to grow, but there was this break for all of the created world. And I think for us as well, even though this is a highly stressful situation. But I will be sad to see if we go back to the levels of pollution that existed before the pandemic.
Okay, we have two hands that are raised, Heidi and then Barbara.
Okay.
I want to sort of get back to the challenge of talking to dairy farmers and cattle ranchers. My aunt and uncle are dairy farmers in Illinois, in Quad Cities area, in Lutheran. And so I'm thinking about how, like, I think there's some money in Biden's infrastructure bill for people who were in coal industries and so forth to relearn new skills and get jobs in alternative energy or solar panels or whatever. And I feel like we need something similar for dairy farmers and cattle ranchers, that maybe they're not feeling the need for it now, but I think meat consumption is going down, and people are learning about this, and so they don't maybe realize a need for changing over to something yet, but the market itself will make them do that. But it would be nice if we had like some Lutheran farmer who was doing this and had realized it and was switching over his production to less pesticides and less cattle and whatever, and could be like that champion out there educating others. Farmer to farmer would be the way to go, not somebody from the city, right?
No, though, urban farmers can learn from other farmers. That would be, and maybe we'll give that'll be an assignment for you or someone, not you personally, but LRC. But that's true, and we know that there must be people out there who are doing this, who have, like the rancher and the farmers I met when I was in North Dakota, and yeah, and I think it's farmer to farmer, rancher to rancher. One thing though we do work on, so I had this job is great. I've gotten to see a lot of parts of the world I never would have. So I was in Tanzania, and to see the work that the LWF and we through the Lutheran World Federation are doing with these are very, very small scale farmers. but helping them to have biodiversity in the crops that they grow. And then this is great. I mean, it's kind of gross, but it's brilliant. Is that they often cook over wood fires, which that's not good because you use wood. The smoke is pretty intense. It's bad for their lungs. It's bad for the kids. And so that we have developed this way, and we have this technology. I got to see it work, where you take cow manure, and then you put it in you're going to make it turn into methane gas, and then that can be used in a much cleaner way for cooking and even for lighting. But I mean, the way they do it, it's like yuck, but it's brilliant. And so I know that in Tanzania, for sure, the Lutheran Church there, probably others, and the Lutheran World Federation are working with these very small scale farmers so that they can have a sustainable livelihood and take care of the land and not depend on one crop. So they can diversify. So I think that's good. I don't know who can talk to the farmers and say we want a farmer to talk to us.
And we are trying to lift up more of them. Sarah had just mentioned that the woman who was reading the gospel and had a goat trying to attack her Bible in our in our worship service, Sarah, the Bowers family.
Oh yeah, I know her really well.
Yes, yeah, we're going to share her story later in a connections call. There are lots of these stories that we're trying to lift up piece by piece, but I have to say, as a nonprofit, it's taking a lot of time to figure out how to get in touch with all of these people. So we're trying to put them on a map. So I do wonder, as far as the institution, like how better can we work with the institution of the ELCA? Because as an affiliate, it is great that we're very nimble and can do this sort of thing. But I also feel like sometimes we don't have the momentum we might need. I mean, honestly, having you as part of our worship has helped incredibly. So that's a big leap. But just having more people know about us and that we can be a hub of that information. If you have any ideas for us how to be better heard, and that we're not just the people who recycle in the Lutheran Church. Yeah,
that's a good point. And I'm wondering, what Raphael, he leads the service and justice home area, but he always talks about how we can deepen and extend the ministries that we have. And I'll see. I'll talk to him, but also to our communications people. Yeah, how can we deepen and extend the work that you're already doing? Yeah. And another thing I think for folks, we recycle here, we compost here, which is funny because both of us grew up in not in the rural areas, but my husband's like into composting now. And there's a service here in Skokie where they'll come and pick up your compost. I don't even have to do the work. But anyways, we can all do that. Every one of us, every individual could do that, and we would not make a dent in the amount of plastics that are being pumped into the environment on a regular basis. So I think advocacy is also an important role for all of us. And I know that Ruth Ivory Moore does a tremendous job, and our Washington office does too.
Bishop Eaton, if I can just jump in, and I didn't have this as a question in advance, but just to pull together a couple things, what Kristen had said about her congregation is growing during this pandemic. And part of it is because of the virtual presence. She's so skilled at producing these worship services, and Jeff also, and Sarah. So I guess what I wanted to ask you is if you would be willing to do more video appearances, maybe short videos. I think when we get into some of these really hard issues like farming, climate, you are the face of the church in the same way that Pope Francis is for Catholics or whatever. And Bishop Curry preached this wonderful opening sermon at the Ecumenical Advocacy Days. I mean, I still go back to that. I'm quoting it in a Bible study I'm writing. I would love to hear more videos from you, short videos, whatever, because I think people trust it's the kind of personal representation function of a head of a church that would make it possible to have change happen from you going on the air and telling us about Jesus the Good Shepherd, and then what that means for cows and farms and everything.
I listened to that sermon. I forgot what I said. I'm glad it was helpful.
But I guess that would be the question is, would you consider, I know Bishop Curry's, constantly out there and stuff, but we'd love to see you more in these kind of spiritually guiding roles to help us on videos.
No, absolutely. And I do tape, and we don't tape anymore. I do record a video every week. It's a brief weekly message. So I'm doing that, and that's possible. What would be helpful would be if you folks would come up with a strategy and then work with Jocelyn Fuller. Do any of you know her? She's the head of strategic communications. And then we could develop a schedule or a calendar, and I can video these things and then make them available for the work that you're doing. Well, and I don't want to, St. Paul says we're not to think more highly of ourselves than we ought.
Right.
But the strategic use of my voice is important. And then someone had said earlier on, if we could have a farmer talking to farmers, or rancher to ranchers, or urban gardeners giving this message, I could be used perhaps in other ways, because I know it's still kind of surprising to me, but it's kind of a draw when I'm on. But I want to garner the attention of other folks, but then these voices who are living this, it would also. So we should think of we need to develop a strategy around that. There's so many issues that are pressing all of the time, that how do we, with the intersectionality, particularly with climate change and all these other issues, I'm trying to figure out, and also with the new church design, future church design, how can we start networks and working together where it doesn't have to be centralized, and in fact it probably should not be from Chicago. Mm-hmm. So how do we activate everybody to say, no, we are the ELCA? So you don't have to answer that question. I'm still working on that myself.
Okay, well, on behalf of the board, thank you so much for taking the time to meet with us. We deeply appreciate it, and we appreciate your partnership, your advocacy, and your presence in our larger congregation.
Thanks. Bye, everybody.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you so much, Bishop Eaton. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Good luck,
bye, board.
baby.
Bye.
Thank you.
Good luck.
Thank you.
Bye.
Yeah.